Laura Bennett always tried to hold herself together, but some days it felt impossible. Her house, a big, polished home in the suburbs, looked perfect from the outside: green lawns, shiny windows, even the laughter of children sometimes echoing in the halls. But inside, life was far from perfect. Her son, Ethan, had been paralyzed from the waist down after a tragic accident 2 years ago, and every moment since had been a struggle, not just for him, but for her and her husband, Daniel. Ethan was 8 now, with bright brown eyes that seemed too large for his small face. He smiled when he could, but often his expression was quiet, thoughtful, or tinged with frustration. Laura spent hours helping him with his daily routines, feeding him, changing him, making sure he was comfortable. Every time she lifted him into his wheelchair or helped him reach for his favorite toys, she felt both love and fear tangled together. She loved him fiercely, but the fear never left her. Daniel was a successful businessman, a man who made millions but struggled with the softer sides of life. He adored Ethan, of course, but he could not always be there. The long hours, the constant meetings, the travel, it all kept him away from the moments Laura lived with Ethan every day. Still, he tried to be present, calling throughout the day and asking detailed questions about his son's care. But Laura could see the worry in his eyes whenever he came home. There was a tension, a heaviness, that neither could quite shake. The house was quiet most of the time. Quiet enough that even small sounds felt loud: the creak of the floorboards, Ethan's wheelchair wheels on the hardwood, or the soft footsteps of Clara, the maid. Clara had been with them for nearly a year, a young woman with kind eyes and a soft voice, who seemed to care for Ethan in her own way. But Laura had never been able to fully trust her. There were little things: Clara's impatience when Ethan needed extra time, her sighs when Laura wasn't around, the way she sometimes avoided eye contact. None of it was proof of anything, yet Laura's instincts pricked at her like tiny needles. It was Daniel who finally suggested the cameras. At first, Laura resisted the idea. "We can't watch her like she's a criminal," she said one evening, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she hadn't really touched. Daniel looked at her, his face tight, worry etched deep into his features. "It's not about mistrust," he said quietly. "It's about keeping Ethan safe. I can't bear the thought of leaving him alone with someone I can't fully see. Just, let's know what's happening when we're not there." Laura stayed silent for a long moment, staring at the steam rising from her cup. She knew he was right. Every night when she went to bed, she thought about what could happen if something went wrong while they were asleep, or at work, or running errands. The fear wasn't paranoia, it was love. It was survival. So Daniel set up the hidden cameras. Small, discreet devices placed around the living room, Ethan's bedroom, the kitchen. Laura didn't like the idea of spying, but she felt a strange comfort knowing that, at any time, they could check and see that their son was safe. Still, there was a shadow that fell over her heart every time she thought about the cameras. She didn't want to catch Clara doing something wrong, but the possibility lingered like a storm cloud, ready to break. Evenings were the hardest. Laura would sit with Ethan, brushing his hair or reading him stories, and every sound in the house would make her flinch. She loved him with everything inside her, but the helplessness weighed her down. Daniel would sometimes come home late, tired and tense, and the silence between them would grow heavy with unspoken fears. Ethan, blissfully unaware, would reach for his toys or smile at his mother, and she would squeeze his hand, trying to anchor herself. Laura often wondered what it would be like if they could truly trust Clara or anyone outside the family. Could she let someone else care for Ethan without the gnawing fear in her chest? Could she step back for even a moment and not worry? The thought made her stomach twist. For now, the cameras were their only shield, a silent watchman in every room, keeping eyes where theirs could not reach. And yet, every night, as Laura turned off the lights and tucked Ethan in, a cold shiver ran down her spine. Something in her gut whispered that danger could come from the most unexpected place. She didn't know what it was, only that she felt it, a quiet, persistent unease. As she kissed Ethan's forehead and left the room, she wondered, could the person they trusted the most be the very one threatening their son? The fear was unbearable. And Laura had a feeling that their lives were about to change forever. The tension in the Bennett house had been building for weeks. Laura noticed it in the way Daniel frowned during dinner, tapping his fingers on the polished oak table, or the way he stared at the empty spaces of the living room as if waiting for something or someone to appear. Laura herself felt like she was walking on eggshells. Every small sound, a creak, a cough, a whisper, made her heart race. She tried to push the feeling away, telling herself that Clara, their maid, was just clumsy or distracted. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt. Daniel had grown restless. One evening, after a long day at work, he sat down next to Laura on the couch. Ethan was asleep in his bedroom, the soft glow of the nightlight casting shadows on his walls. Daniel took Laura's hand and squeezed it tightly. "Laura, I can't stop thinking about Ethan," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "What if something happens while we're not around? I know Clara seems nice, but I can't be sure." Not fully. Laura looked into his eyes and saw the fear she had been feeling herself. She had always trusted Daniel to be calm and rational, but this was different. The man she knew to be steady and controlled looked like a father terrified for his child, and it shook her to her core. "I know," Laura said softly. "I feel it too. I don't want to think the worst. I don't want to believe she could hurt him." Daniel shook his head. "It's not about thinking the worst, Laura. It's about knowing the truth. I've been considering hidden cameras." He paused, waiting for her reaction. "Just in the rooms Ethan spends the most time. Just so we can see that he's safe when we're not around. Nothing more." Laura's stomach twisted. Spying felt wrong, even cruel, but she couldn't argue with the logic. Every day, she lived in fear for Ethan. Every day, she prayed that nothing would happen when she stepped out of the room, even for a few minutes. And if cameras could give them a sense of safety, maybe it was worth it. I don't know, Daniel," she admitted. "It feels like we're invading her trust. But I can't lie. I worry too." He nodded. "I know. That's why I wanted to talk to you first. We won't tell anyone. Just us. And if everything is fine, then we'll never need to check them. But if something isn't right, we'll know immediately." Laura sighed. She imagined watching Clara on a screen, every move captured without her knowing. The thought made her uneasy, almost sick to her stomach. But then she thought of Ethan, his bright eyes, the way he struggled to do even the simplest things, the helplessness in his small hands. Could she really risk not knowing what was happening when she wasn't there? The decision was made. Daniel contacted a professional to install the cameras discreetly in the living room, the kitchen, and Ethan's bedroom. Small devices, invisible to the naked eye, hidden in corners or inside objects that seemed ordinary. Laura watched as the technician worked, a mix of relief and tension twisting inside her. Every beep, every adjustment of the lenses, felt like a silent alarm in her mind. After the installation, Daniel handed her the small monitor. "We can watch anytime," he said. "But only if we feel the need. Don't let this control you. Just peace of mind." Laura nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the cameras were a double-edged sword. They would protect Ethan, yes, but they would also reveal things she wasn't ready to see. What if Clara wasn't as kind as she appeared? What if the person they trusted most turned out to be the one who could harm their son? The next few days were tense. Laura noticed Clara acting a little differently, slightly hurried in her movements, glancing around more often than before, almost as if she sensed something. Laura's heart would leap every time she saw the maid frown or sigh while taking care of Ethan. She told herself it was her imagination, her fear playing tricks on her. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Watch carefully. Something isn't right." At night, Laura would sit alone in Ethan's room after tucking him in. She would run her fingers along the blanket, imagining what could happen if someone made a mistake, or worse, if someone meant to hurt him. Daniel often came home late, exhausted from work, but she would sometimes catch him staring at the cameras silently before going to bed. The worry in his eyes mirrored her own, and it made her realize they were both trapped in the same relentless fear. Laura's mind became a constant loop of what ifs. She would imagine Clara taking care of Ethan, doing things wrong, being impatient, or even more sinister. Every shadow, every noise, every small gesture from Clara now carried weight. The cameras became a silent presence in the house, a reminder that trust was fragile and protection was necessary. And while Laura hated the thought of spying, she also knew it was a shield, a lifeline for her son. The fear was still there, but now it was tempered with a small thread of control, a sense that if something went wrong, they would know and they could act. But even with the cameras, Laura felt a shiver run down her spine each night. She didn't know what they would find or what secrets Clara might be hiding. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice warned her that the hidden eyes might soon reveal more than they were ready to see. Life in the Bennett household had changed, though nothing looked different from the outside. The cameras were there, small and hidden, silently observing every corner where Ethan spent his day. Laura tried to act as if nothing had changed, trying to carry on with the routines that had become so familiar, the early morning breakfasts, helping Ethan into his wheelchair, brushing his hair, and settling him into his therapy exercises. But beneath the surface, a quiet tension had taken hold. Ethan, unaware of the cameras, continued to live his world of small joys and frustrations. He liked to play with building blocks, stacking them as high as he could before they tumbled down with a loud crash that always made Laura laugh nervously. He liked reading picture books, though his small hands often struggled to turn the pages. Laura would watch him and feel a mixture of pride and fear. She loved his determination, but she also hated how fragile he seemed, how dependent he was on her and Daniel. Every day was a careful balancing act between nurturing his independence and protecting him from harm. Clara, the maid, went about her duties with a practiced efficiency that seemed perfect on the surface. She helped Ethan with his meals, tidied the rooms, and even joined him in small games to make him smile. But Laura's instincts were rarely wrong, and she couldn't shake a constant, gnawing unease. Clara's smiles sometimes felt forced, her attention sometimes fleeting. Laura began noticing small things, a sigh too heavy, a glance that lingered too long on Ethan, a whisper of impatience when he needed help. The cameras became Laura's lifeline. At first, she only checked them occasionally, a flick of a button here and there to ensure everything was fine. But gradually, she found herself watching more often, especially during times when she had stepped out to run errands or attend appointments. There were moments when Clara's behavior seemed perfectly normal, her care gentle and attentive. But there were other times that made Laura's heart pound with unease, Clara raising her voice at Ethan when he struggled to eat, helping him roughly when he needed gentleness, or disappearing with items from the room that shouldn't have moved. Every small act on the screen twisted Laura's stomach into knots. She would pause the footage, rewind, watch it again, trying to convince herself that she was imagining things. But her intuition, honed by months of fear and worry, refused to let her ignore the tiny flashes of something wrong. She had never felt this torn before, caught between wanting to trust Clara and needing to protect Ethan at all costs. Daniel noticed her anxiety, though she tried to hide it. One evening, he came home early from work, rubbing his tired eyes, only to find Laura hovering over the monitor. "You've been watching a lot lately," he said softly, sitting beside her. She didn't answer immediately, only gestured toward the screen. "I can't help it," she admitted. "Sometimes I think she's just tired or distracted, but other times, I see things that scare me. I can't ignore it." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We'll keep watching," he said quietly. "We can't let anything happen to Ethan. That's all that matters." The days passed in a strange rhythm. Laura would help Ethan with his therapy exercises, guiding his arms and legs gently, watching his determination and frustration with equal parts pride and heartbreak. She would feed him carefully, noting how he struggled to lift utensils or chew his food. All the while, Clara was there, sometimes patient, sometimes impatient, and sometimes something else that Laura couldn't name. There were small victories, too. Ethan laughed more these days, encouraged by Laura and Daniel's constant presence. He learned to use a few words more clearly, to ask for things he wanted, to express frustration without tears. These moments of normalcy were like sunlight breaking through clouds, and Laura clung to them, letting herself breathe a little easier. But even then, the shadow of doubt lingered. Laura started noticing patterns on the cameras. Clara would sometimes step out of the room when Ethan needed her most. Other times, she would glance nervously toward doors or the hallway as if expecting someone to watch her. Laura's anxiety built steadily. She felt like a detective, scanning for clues, while simultaneously wishing she didn't have to. She hated watching someone she had trusted with her son, hated even thinking that Clara could be capable of harm. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt tense and fragile. Every noise seemed amplified, the scrape of a chair, the crash of a toy, the shuffle of Clara's shoes. Laura felt her heart jump each time she checked the cameras, expecting, dreading, hoping to see only normal care but preparing herself for something more. By the end of each day, she was exhausted not just physically from helping Ethan, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Watching the cameras, trying to read Clara's behavior, feeling the constant weight of fear, it left her drained. And yet, she could not stop. Every time she stepped out, even for a few minutes, the pull of worry was too strong. Ethan's safety depended on her vigilance, and she could not let herself forget that. The cameras were a silent presence in the house, small, unblinking witnesses to every interaction. And though they offered a semblance of security, they also served as a constant reminder. Trust was fragile, and danger could hide in the most ordinary places. Laura often lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining what might happen if she wasn't careful. She felt trapped in a strange mixture of hope and fear, love and dread, all tied to the life of her little boy. And somewhere, deep inside, a quiet but insistent thought whispered, something wasn't right. Clara's secret, whatever it was, had not yet revealed itself. But Laura knew, she could feel it in her bones, that the cameras would not only protect them, but eventually uncover the truth. Laura Bennett had grown used to the quiet rhythm of her days, to the careful routines of feeding, dressing, and entertaining Ethan, and to the subtle presence of the hidden cameras. But recently, the rhythm felt off. Something had shifted in Clara's behavior, small, almost invisible details that made Laura's stomach tighten with unease. It started with fleeting moments, Clara disappearing for a few minutes during Ethan's meals, returning with an expression that was just a little too neutral, a little too controlled. Sometimes, when Laura glanced at her son, she would notice a grimace he tried to hide or a hesitant movement he didn't make before. It was almost imperceptible, but it tugged at Laura's heart, setting off alarms she could not ignore. One afternoon, as Ethan played with his blocks, Laura was in the kitchen preparing a snack. She glanced at the monitor, just out of habit, and froze. Clara had picked up Ethan roughly, lifting him by the arms in a way that made his body stiffen. Laura's pulse jumped. She quickly turned off the stove and rushed into the living room, calling his name. "Ethan, are you okay?" Clara turned with a calm smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's fine, Mrs. Bennett," she said, her voice soft but strange. Laura's gaze flicked to Ethan, who nodded silently, a little too quickly, as if trying to assure her that everything was normal. But Laura knew better. The way he flinched had told her all she needed to know. From that day on, Laura's nerves were frayed. She began paying closer attention to the cameras, checking them at odd times and studying Clara's every move. There were moments of normal care, of course. Clara would gently help Ethan with a toy, feed him carefully, or adjust his wheelchair. But those moments were punctuated by flashes of something wrong, impatient gestures, whispers when Laura wasn't looking, subtle roughness when Ethan struggled with a simple task. Laura tried to tell herself she was imagining things. Perhaps Clara was tired, or stressed, or just clumsy. But then came the small, almost accidental signs: a bruise on Ethan's arm that hadn't been there the day before, a scratch on his hand that he tried to hide, a toy thrown roughly to the side. Each one made Laura's chest tighten with fear. She wanted to confront Clara directly, but a part of her hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if she accused someone innocent? The thought of making a mistake made her stomach twist. Daniel noticed Laura's growing anxiety. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, he found her sitting on the couch, staring at the monitor again. Her hands were trembling slightly, her face pale. "I saw it again today," she said quietly. The way she lifted him, and the way she reacted when he dropped the toy. "I can't explain it, Daniel, but something isn't right. I know it." Daniel leaned close, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "We'll watch. Together. Whatever it is, we'll find out. That's why we set up the cameras. You're not alone in this." Even with Daniel's words, Laura's fear continued to grow. She began to notice patterns in Clara's behavior. The maid would always step out of the room when Ethan needed extra care, but she would return with a casual smile, acting as though nothing had happened. She sometimes whispered to herself when Laura was in another room, her lips moving just fast enough that Laura couldn't catch the words but could feel the tension in her gestures. The cameras captured every detail, and Laura pored over the footage late at night, her eyes straining from hours of watching. She could see the moments Clara tried to hide her impatience, the subtle flinches Ethan made when she handled him too roughly, the fleeting glances that seemed meant to avoid scrutiny. Each video left Laura more anxious than the last, her maternal instincts screaming at her that something dangerous was unfolding under her very roof. And then, one day, the unmistakable moment came. Laura was watching live footage from the living room when she saw Clara approach Ethan with a bottle of juice. At first, everything seemed normal. But then Clara's hand lingered too long on the spout, pressing it down in a way that caused juice to spill over Ethan's clothes and lap. He flinched and tried to pull away, and Clara's expression tightened, almost like frustration hiding behind a smile. Laura's chest ached as she watched. It was the first clear sign that the unease she had felt for weeks wasn't her imagination. Clara's secret, whatever it was no longer subtle. She was hiding it, manipulating it, trying to cover her actions. Laura felt a mixture of rage, fear, and heartbreak. How could someone she had trusted with her son behave this way? And how much worse could it become if she didn't act? That night, Laura and Daniel reviewed the footage together, frame by frame. The evidence was subtle but undeniable. The impatient gestures, the small rough movements, the way Clara's eyes darted whenever Ethan made a sound of discomfort. Their hearts pounded, and Laura felt tears prick at her eyes. She had known something was wrong, but seeing it made it real, too real to ignore. Daniel placed a comforting arm around her shoulders. "We'll protect him, Laura," he said firmly. "We'll do whatever it takes. No one will hurt Ethan while we're here." Laura nodded, clinging to his words even as the fear tightened its grip around her heart. The first signs of danger had appeared, and now there was no turning back. They had the cameras, they had the evidence, but the question lingered, haunting and heavy. Just how far would Clara's secret go before it was fully revealed? The tension in the Bennett household had reached a breaking point. Laura's nerves were frayed, and Daniel's worry had deepened into a quiet, unspoken dread. Every day, the cameras revealed small, unsettling moments, Clara's impatience, Ethan's flinches, her subtle gestures meant to hide mistakes. But nothing had prepared Laura and Daniel for the moment when the truth could no longer be denied. It was a rainy afternoon. The soft patter of water against the windows filled the house, mingling with the faint hum of Ethan's wheelchair wheels as he rolled slowly across the living room. Laura had been watching the cameras while preparing a snack, her heart in her throat as Clara helped Ethan reach for a book on the low shelf. At first, everything seemed normal, but then Laura noticed Clara's hand tighten around Ethan's arm. Laura froze, holding her breath. Clara's expression was calm, almost too calm, but her movements were deliberate and rough. Ethan winced, trying to pull away, and that was when Laura knew there was no denying it anymore. This was not carelessness or clumsiness. This was intentional. She called Daniel immediately. "Daniel, come quick, you need to see this." He rushed into the living room, his eyes scanning the monitor. The sight made his stomach turn. There was Clara, kneeling beside Ethan, her hands pressing him down as if forcing him to do something against his will. Her voice, low and muttered, carried across the room. Ethan's small body trembled slightly, his bright eyes wide with confusion and fear. Laura's heart ached. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "How could she? Why would she?" Daniel put a hand on her shoulder, his own face pale but determined. "We'll stop this. We'll protect him. Now." The footage was undeniable. Over the next hour, they reviewed the recordings in horror. Clara's secret unfolded before their eyes, small acts of cruelty, moments of negligence disguised as care, and subtle manipulations meant to test Ethan or control him. She had spilled food intentionally, handled him roughly, hidden small injuries, and lied to Laura whenever she asked about his day. Laura felt a wave of betrayal wash over her. The woman they had trusted with their son, the one they had welcomed into their home, who had smiled at them and seemed kind, was capable of harm. And she had been doing it right under their noses. Daniel picked up the phone with shaking hands. "We need to confront her. Now," he said, his voice low but firm. Laura nodded, still trembling. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to protect Ethan immediately, but part of her also felt numb, overwhelmed by the revelation and the depth of betrayal. They approached Clara calmly but firmly, each step heavy with anticipation. She looked up from tidying the living room, her expression neutral, as if she sensed nothing was wrong. But when Laura spoke, her voice was strong despite the tremor beneath it. "Clara, we've seen everything. We know what you've been doing to Ethan." Clara's face flickered, a shadow of something, fear, guilt, or anger, crossing her features. She tried to speak, to explain, but Daniel cut her off. "No explanations. You're leaving. Now." Clara hesitated for a moment, then quietly gathered her things. There was no resistance, no words of apology, just a cold silence as she walked out of the house for the last time. Once the door closed behind her, Laura sank into the couch, burying her face in her hands. Ethan was safe, yes, but the emotional wound ran deep. How could someone they had trusted so completely betray them like this? How had they not seen the signs sooner? Daniel knelt beside her, holding her close. "We did everything we could, Laura. We protected him. That's what matters." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. I feel so guilty. I should have known sooner. I should have protected him better." "You protected him," Daniel said firmly. "You watched, you cared, you acted. Without you, we might not have caught this at all. Ethan is safe because of you." Laura looked at her son, who had been quietly playing with his blocks in the corner, unaware of the storm that had just passed. His small, trusting eyes met hers, and a wave of love and relief washed over her. She hugged him tightly, feeling the tension in her body slowly ease, though the memory of betrayal lingered like a shadow. That night, Laura sat by Ethan's bedside, stroking his hair and whispering words of comfort. She thought about the hidden cameras, the silent guardians that had revealed the truth before it was too late. Without them, she knew she might never have discovered Clara's secret, and the thought sent a shiver down her spine. For the first time in weeks, Laura felt a tentative sense of relief. The danger was gone, and Ethan was safe. But the experience had left a permanent mark on her heart. She realized that love and vigilance must go hand in hand, that trust must be earned and never taken for granted. And though the pain of betrayal would take time to heal, Laura knew one thing for certain: she would never let anything or anyone threaten Ethan again. The cameras had done their job, but her instinct, her love, and her determination would be the true guardians of her son's safety from now on. After Clara left, the Bennett household felt strangely quiet. The tension that had weighed so heavily over the past weeks lingered in the air, like a shadow refusing to leave. Laura sat on the couch for a long time, watching Ethan play with his blocks in the corner, her heart swelling with relief and fear all at once. He was safe, yes, but the betrayal of someone they had trusted so completely left a scar that wouldn't fade quickly. Daniel sat beside her, rubbing her back gently. "It's over," he said softly. "She's gone. Ethan's safe. That's what matters." Laura nodded, though her hands still trembled. "I know. But it feels heavy. I trusted her. I welcomed her into our home. And her voice broke, and she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Daniel pulled her closer, holding her hand tightly. "Laura, you did everything right. You noticed the signs, you stayed vigilant, and because of you, we caught her before anything worse could happen. Ethan's safety is in our hands, and we protected him." Laura took a deep breath, trying to let his words sink in. Slowly, the relief began to seep through her fear. She looked at Ethan, who was humming softly to himself, his small hands carefully stacking blocks into neat towers. The innocence in his actions, the trust he radiated, made her realize how fragile and precious life could be and how much she was willing to fight to protect it. The next days were focused on healing and restoring a sense of normalcy. Clara was gone, and Laura made sure the cameras remained in place, not as tools of suspicion, but as silent guardians for peace of mind. They helped her feel secure, knowing she could always check on Ethan even if she stepped out for a moment. But more than the cameras, Laura's love, intuition, and vigilance became the strongest shield around her son. Daniel spent more time at home, reducing late-night work and joining Laura in Ethan's therapy sessions. They laughed together when Ethan accomplished a small task, like stacking all his blocks without them falling or saying a new word clearly. Every smile, every giggle, every milestone felt like a victory, a reassurance that their love and care could overcome the fear that had haunted them. Laura also began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt stronger, more aware of her instincts, and more determined to protect her family. The experience with Clara had been painful, but it had also reminded her of her own resilience. She could endure fear, confront betrayal, and still rise for the sake of her son. The bond between Laura, Daniel, and Ethan grew tighter, forged in the fire of trial and fear. Evenings became their most cherished time. Laura would read to Ethan, helping him explore new stories and adventures in books. Daniel would join in, adding his own playful voices and expressions, making Ethan laugh until his little body shook. These simple moments, once ordinary, now felt precious and full of meaning. They were reminders of why the vigilance had mattered, why the cameras had been necessary, and why love had to be active, not passive. One night, as Laura tucked Ethan into bed, she lingered by his side, brushing his hair gently and whispering, "I'll always protect you, Ethan. Always." He smiled sleepily, his trust in her shining through, and she felt a warmth that melted the lingering fear in her heart. She knew that, despite the trials they had faced, they had emerged stronger, more connected, and more vigilant than ever before. Daniel joined them, standing quietly at the door. "He's safe," he said softly, as much to himself as to Laura. "And we'll make sure he always is." Laura nodded, feeling the weight of fear lift slightly. The cameras, the careful observations, the late-night worries, they had all been necessary. But more than anything, it was their love, attention, and unity that had truly protected Ethan. The betrayal had shaken them, yes, but it had also taught them the importance of trust, vigilance, and the power of parental love. In the weeks that followed, the Bennetts focused on the little joys. Ethan laughed more freely, reaching for new toys, exploring his world, and growing in confidence with every passing day. Laura and Daniel found solace in each other, supporting one another and rebuilding the sense of security that Clara had threatened. The house, once tense and heavy with fear, now resonated with laughter, warmth, and cautious peace. And though Laura knew the memory of betrayal would never completely fade, it no longer held the power to paralyze her. Instead, it reminded her of her strength, her vigilance, and the fierce love that had saved her son. She had faced fear, confronted deception, and emerged determined, resilient, and unwavering in her commitment to protect Ethan. As Laura sat by Ethan's bedside one evening, watching him drift to sleep with a soft smile on his face, she whispered quietly, "Nothing will ever hurt you while I'm here." And for the first time in a long while, she felt that promise could truly be kept. The cameras had revealed the truth, but it was her love, courage, and determination that had ensured Ethan's safety. And as the Bennett family settled into a rhythm of healing, laughter, and care, Laura realized that they were stronger now than ever, bonded not just by blood, but by the trials they had survived and the trust they had rebuilt together.